Welcome and thank you for joining us on World Insight. I'm Li Chou-An sitting in for Tian Wei tonight. Coming up on the program, the U.S. and South Korea have begun their annual 10-day joint military drill, which has alarmed the DPRK. Suspending these exercises really bring the DPRK to the negotiating table. Plus, the World Robot Conference has kicked off in Beijing, featuring the latest in artistic and service robots. How does the progress of China's robotics industry compare to others? We begin tonight on the Korean Peninsula, where joint military exercises by the United States and South Korea are underway. The Uchi Freedom Guardian joint drills will last from August 21st to August 31st and will involve computer simulations designed to prepare for potential attacks from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Given the recent tensions on the Korean Peninsula, this drill seems to cast an even bigger shadow over Northeast Asia.
The United States and South Korea have begun their annual joint military drill. The DPRK criticized this military exercise, saying it is a highly provocative rehearsal for an invasion and is the most explicit expression of hostility.
The U.S. will be wholly held accountable for the catastrophic consequences to be entailed by such reckless, aggressive war maneuvers, and it chose a military confrontation.
However, South Korean President Moon Jae-in insisted the drill is purely of a defensive nature.
It is an annual exercise of a defensive nature, and there is no intention of heightening military tensions on the Korean Peninsula. North Korea should not distort our efforts, and it should not use the drills as an excuse to aggravate the situation by making provocative actions.
This year's Uchi Freedom Guardian drill involves 50,000 troops from South Korea and more than 17,000 from the United States, down from last year's 25,000. U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis told the press that the reduction in the drill scale has nothing to do with Pyongyang.
North Korea knows this is a wholly defensive, for whatever they may say for public consumption, they know this is a defensive exercise. It's been going on for decades. I mean, the name has changed over the years, but it's the same exercise been going on.
The drill comes amid escalating tensions between the U.S. and the DPRK after Kim Jong-un threatened to fire missiles into waters near the U.S. territory of Guam. China has again urged the U.S., South Korea, and related parties to take the dual suspension initiative proposed by China seriously and resume peace talks.
We think that South Korea and the United States holding joint military drills is not beneficial to easing either the current tensions or the efforts by all sides to promote talks.
On Tuesday, the U.S. announced they will expand the sanctions on the DPRK, while the DPRK on Wednesday ordered the production of more solid-fuel rocket engines and rocket warhead tips. With words between Pyongyang and Washington, tensions on the Korean Peninsula have been escalating, and now the ongoing military drill has made the situation more unpredictable.
So how are the U.S.-South Korea annual military drills affecting the situation there on the Korean Peninsula? Let's ask our panelists. With us in our Beijing studio is Mr. Wang Yiwei, who's the director of Institute of International Affairs at Renmin University. Also in Beijing, we have Keo Chung, a professor and visiting scholar at Tsinghua University and the editor-in-chief of the Fourth Media. And in Washington, D.C., we invited Michael O'Hanlon, who is a senior fellow with the Center for the 21st Century Security and Intelligence and the director of research for foreign policy at the Brookings Institution. Welcome to you all. So the two countries, U.S. and South Korea, have started another round of military drill this Monday. The president of South Korea has quickly called this purely defensive. But many say that this could just escalate the tension even more. I want to first get your thoughts on this. Let's start with the parties involved. Professor Chom first. Give us the South Korean perspective.
In essence, it is not, unfortunately, defensive. As we know, as everybody knows, last 70 years, what the U.S. has done with regard to the Korean Peninsula, particularly with the DPRK, the North Korea. In fact, the president of South Korea, the ROK, doesn't have any military political independence. I'm sorry to say that. No matter what he says, it is the United States will decide regard the military or the nuclear, the military drills. But what it is that UFG, the military drills, will elevate the whole military tension in Korean Peninsula. I don't think that the DPRK, the Pyongyang government, will sit idle. I think they will do something with regard to the re-engaging in the military drills in the Korean Peninsula.
Mr. O'Hanlon, your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm afraid that I have to disagree strongly with my Chinese friend. In fact, I'm a little surprised to hear him put things that way. Normally, I hear a more balanced view from Chinese counterparts. If we want to go back in history,
that was actually Professor from South Korea representing South Korean perspective.
I'm Korean.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, then I will disagree anyway. But I'm glad you clarified that. I'm very glad you clarified that, because the notion that the United States bears responsibility for the fundamental state of hostilities on the Korean Peninsula is frankly ridiculous. And I think we need to get beyond ridiculous comments if we're going to make any constructive progress. There is plenty of room to debate whether we should still be doing these kinds of exercises and what diplomatic approaches we should take. But the United States came to the rescue of South Korea in 1950, and we have stood by them ever since as they built an amazing democracy. And they have complete freedom and sovereignty, and they know that very well. So to me, the US-ROK alliance is one of the most remarkable accomplishments in the world for both countries, for both the United States and South Korea. And we are still threatened by a North Korean regime that treats its people worse than any other government on earth, or at least certainly in the top 5 worst regimes, that continues to spend 25% of its GDP on its military. Under these circumstances, to blame the United States fundamentally for the state of hostilities is frankly not constructive.
Professor Chung, I saw you shaking your head. Do you want to respond to what's being said there?
Who is the real provocateur in this whole, only in Korean Peninsula, around the whole world? Who holds the most number of the nuclear warheads than any other nation on earth? Is the United States. And the US destroyed the Korean Peninsula in 1950-53 war. Everybody knows about it. 1/3 of population of the North was wiped out.
That's absurd.
So listen, gentlemen, what we are talking about in a free discussion. So what I'm saying, the US is finally come to an end. I hope the Washington comes to an end to not anymore the divide and conquer strategy in Korean Peninsula. Let the Korean people in both sides to come to find some peaceful solution. And we want to find some self-determined peaceful solution, not anymore dictated by the Washington power. As everybody knows, it is the United States who control the whole South Korean population in terms of the military control. The Pentagon's the full spectrum dominance has continued for 70 years. Everybody knows about it. No matter what the gentleman in Washington says, that's the fact. That's the fact.
Mr. O'Hanlon, how would you respond?
Are you in Seoul or in Pyongyang? Now, this is absolutely absurd.
The Korean,
when I talk to
South Korea,
my South Korean friend has any support in...
There is only one Korea, Mr. Gentleman.
My friend in South Korea has very few... I thought I was asked a question, sir. Sir, I thought I was asked a question.
There is only one Korea.
I don't think my friend in South Korea has virtually any support in his own country. Ma'am, are you going to let us both speak over each other, or do we want to make this a little bit more
go ahead,
regulated?
Mr. O'Hanlon,
I have a point I'd like to make, and then I'll stop. If my friend... Thank you.
Make your point, Mr. O'Hanlon,
I would appreciate it if my
please.
friend in Seoul would let me finish my point. There is very, very little support in South Korea for the viewpoint that my friend in Seoul has put forth, because it is historically wrong, and he knows it.
You are not Korean. You never know about the Korean people. You do not know about how Koreans think about the United States of America.
So I get the sense that, is this a general sense there in South Korea that people there are not entirely satisfied with the way that the U.S. is dealing with its crisis? Somehow, does it feel that it got bypassed somehow, or does it want to take full control of its defense? Is it about this?
Even the operational control on the army of Korean military is not at the hands of the Korean president. It's at the hands of the U.S., the commander in South Korea. How would you say the Korean people have independence from Washington power? No one can miss the gentleman from Washington. What can you say about the U.S. control on Korean Peninsula? Let us let us fight to bring about the peaceful reunification, not anymore for the sake of the U.S. interest in Korean Peninsula issues.
All right, let's bring in a third perspective on this. Let's bring in Professor Wang on this. How do you view this, the gap
he asked me a question.
of this understanding?
He asked me a question.
Well, I think the debate between my Korean friends and the American friend indicated very clearly that the real problem of the North Korea, the so-called North Korea problem, is not between China, South Korea, or United States. It's between Koreans with Americans. There's some Chinese thinking that why the United States not take the North Korea issue as the diplomatic agenda for many years. Only recently, to show some Flexor muscles in this Korean Peninsula, because some Americans they need actually the threat, so-called threat from the North, for the excuse for the deploy defense system in South Korea to, as you said, to control more intensively on the South Korean side. Even they want to do similar things in Japan, even other. So to make China felt that the United States is really want to solve the problem of the North Korea, or just want to keep the tension to have the other strategic purpose to serve the global missile defense system.
And earlier when we were discussing this, you said that the U.S. and South Korea go in with different intentions. Talk to us more about these.
Yeah, actually, from the North Korea side, their thing about the threat is from the U.S. or the U.S. alliance with South Korea or with Japan. So who is provocative? The North Korea consider you are provocative, and of course the American side said every time they identify North Korea as a provocative, and even blame China, not take responsible in and calm down the North Korea's tensions. But actually, this is not the egg and chicken problems. Everybody blame each other. But to be frankly, North Korea don't feel so safe to open reform. But so we need security guarantee from U.S. side, particularly from the U.S. side, for the North Korea.
But what is U.S. worst fear?
The U.S. very worried about is not a nuclear North Korea, but North Korea used the nuclear weapons in the long term to deter U.S. to not interfere in the affairs of the Korean Peninsula, and then united the whole Korean Peninsula, and then let the Americans military go. That's the Americans very worried about that.
Mr. Helen, do you agree that's the biggest concern from the United States? It is not about the worries of the DPRK really hitting continental U.S., but the worry that the DPRK might use military means to reunify the peninsula and drive out U.S. forces stationed there, of course.
If the Korean Peninsula is reunified in a way that Koreans are happy with, the Americans will be very happy to leave. And in fact, my South Korean friend should know that if a majority of his fellow countrymen ever felt the way he does, we will leave. And by the way, when we leave, this time we aren't coming back, because Korea is a very exposed part of the Eurasian Peninsula, or Eurasian landmass. The reason we are there is for reasons of history and commitment to our ally and steadfastness in support of the South Korean democracy. If the South Koreans ever want us to leave, we will leave the same way we left the Philippines, the same way we've left other countries when we were asked to leave. But South Koreans need to know, if that happens, we aren't coming back once they get in trouble. They better be ready to handle the situation on their own. My Chinese friend is wrong to think that somehow the most important thing for the United States is to have forces in Korea. The reason we have them there is to defend South Korea. We have forces in Japan for regional and global power projection. That is true. The forces in Japan have a global role. The forces in there to defend Korea. And that is not a particularly essential mission for any other American national security interest. So if the Korean Peninsula could ever be reunified, we would be happy to see that happen. And if we're ever asked to leave, we will leave.
Professor Chow, I'll let you respond.
Yeah, I mean, even the James Clapper, the former director of the NSA, most recently in June 26 in South Korea, called for there's no more denuclearization. It's already over. The game is over. And he called for even the interest section should be set in Washington and Pyongyang to talk about the peaceful solution. And he finally called for the peace treaty is the only solution. Not only James Clapper, but also William Perry, the George Schultz, and all the former defense and intelligence high officials called for peaceful solution. Now even at the latest last week, Steve Bannon from the White House called for the U.S. troops out of Korea may be the answer, the final answer to find some peaceful solution. As you mentioned, the DPRK has been threatened by the U.S., the nuclear power in the world, the last 60-some years, and they came up as a last resort to build their own, the self-defensive, as a nuclear deterrent power. That's the only reason why they built their own independent, the self-defense measure to stop the U.S. from further the aggressive actions as they did the last 60-some years. So, but by now I'm much more optimistic. The Washington and the Pyongyang will find some solution, peaceful solution, rather than the nuclear war in Korean Peninsula.
Professor Wang, what would it take to negotiate a permanent peace treaty on the Korean Peninsula?
Let me further continue your discussion with the American counterpart. American counterpart always claim that the U.S. airlines is want to defend of your democracy.
Not at all.
So what's the top priority for the Korean people? Democracy, stability, peace, and unification, what?
It's a self-determined reunification. That's what the Koreans, not only in
and
South...
And then the U.S. is obstacles all the hope for
U.S. has not, if I can be frankly speaking, if I'm allowed, U.S. has not been supportive of our self-determined peaceful reunification. The U.S., the traditional strategy, I don't think that my friend in Washington may agree with me, but it's the divide and conquer strategy has ruled our Korean Peninsula. And then from the Korean War, more than 4 million population, only less than 30 million population wiped out. And we don't want any more war in Korean Peninsula. We hope the peaceful solution for the Korean, and not only in Korea, but also around the world.
I can't agree with you more. China and South Korea are the most important neighbor of the North Korea. So we feel more uncomfortable about the North Korea situation, either nuclear or missile tests. So U.S. far away from North Korea and the Korean Peninsula. So even the military exercises, again and again. So it's very close to China's territory, and the missile defense system SAT is also it's a challenge for China's national security. So China and the South Korea should work together to negotiate to help the North Korea bring back to the negotiation table. As you said, the peace treaty. Maybe peace treaty is long term because now North Korea and the United States they even have not diplomatic relations, not recognize each other. Now still the civil war still continued, actually, to be frankly. So we should first to stop kind of this intention escalation situation to make a common security guaranteed mechanism in the Korean Peninsula.
Mr. O'Hanlon, let me give you a chance to respond to, the U.S. divide and conquer strategy. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, first, I have a lot of problems with my South Korean friend on this show. Historically speaking, it's offensive to say the United States killed a third of the North Korean population. We came to the defense of South Korea when asked, and we have stayed there ever since we were asked. He seems to forget who started the Korean War. It was North Korea. It was not South Korea. It was not the United States. And it was not China, although China did come in on North Korea's side later that year. So we have to remember the history a little bit here to know what caused this in the first place. However, I do agree with my counterparts, and I thought the show today actually was going to be about going forward and trying to find a peaceful solution. I'm very happy to discuss how we best do that. I agree 100% with them. Frankly, starting a show with such incredibly historically inaccurate depictions of how we got here is not constructive for figuring out how to go forward. So we have to think about peaceful ways going forward. We are not interested in dividing and conquering. I think it's important for a Chinese host of this kind of a show to understand and explain to viewers that the South Korean you have on today does not speak for his country. The vast majority of South Koreans disagree very strongly, which is why there is still a U.S.-ROK alliance, because they want our help to protect against North Korea. Yes, there are disagreements over how to pursue some kind of a peaceful resolution, but those are disagreements among friends who begin with the basic premise that we must face a ruthless enemy with deterrence and strength.
Let me just get back to the military exercises for a moment here. The military exercises we're talking about will run through the end of the month, and they will involve computer simulations as well as 17,500 U.S. troops with other South Korean allies also joining this year. Australia, Britain, Canada, Colombia, the Netherlands, and New Zealand. So, Professor Wang, what does the scale and participation of allies tell you about these drills?
Well, these drills, in the eyes of the Americans, want to show the leadership, they keep the alliance system strongly, and then not just deter the North Korea from go further. Actually, it's also signals to other countries like China, Russia, and others to show the U.S. is not people back to United States and not American first, but it still have the capacity and applications to protect the allies.
Professor Chung, your thoughts on this? Final remarks? We're running out of time.
It's a show of force from the Washington, but the U.S., the Washington, apparently decided to scale it down. The 7,500 number was cut down from the last year, and the computer the simulation, the war, the game, rather than the real action game. So there's apparently there's a sign from Washington to try to cool it down, the whole situation. But we do not know yet, the DPRK, how they will react to that. But no matter what, it is my hope and wish that the peaceful solution will be achieved by any means necessary by everybody involved in this whole process.
Peaceful solution is all we are trying to achieve here. We can all agree on. But thank you to you all. Mr. O'Hanlon joining us there in Washington, D.C., and Professor Chung, Professor Wang with us in the Beijing studio. Many thanks for your insights. You're now watching World Insight on CGTN. Still to come on our program. The World Robot Conference has kicked off in Beijing, featuring the latest in artistic and service robots. But could these helpful robots pose everything from our jobs to our lives? Stay with us. Welcome back to World Insight. The annual World Robot Conference, or the WRC, officially kicked off today at the Beijing Yichuang International Exhibition and Convention Center. The WRC aims to foster a new ecosystem for collaborative innovation and to develop a global robotics industry. Before our discussion on the progress of this technology, let's now have a look at this package from our reporter.
The bot economy is taking off worldwide. Tio, a robotic pianist, is definitely winning the audience over with his music prowess at the WRC 2017.
Robot pianist, his name is Nervous, and he's very accurate. He never makes any errors, and he can play even faster and more accurate than human beings. But the purpose we designed this, we don't want to compete with human beings. We want to collaborate with the human, and we want to inspire in educational purpose.
CAMBOTS is a robotics company based in Beijing. It specializes in service robots. The robots interact with consumers and the user and is able to use facial recognition. The newest technology, Yo-Yo, is made up of 5 detachable parts and has 20 joints, allowing it to move swiftly from place to place. 你好，悠悠，给我跳个炫酷的舞蹈。
Yo-Yo doesn't come cheap. At this point in time, it has a hefty $32,000 US price tag. But the novelty of having a robotic guide is enough for many banks, museums, and malls to fork out the big bucks.
Yo-Yo is currently used in F&B, education, and banking sectors. It can use facial recognition, voice recognition, and detect your emotions. We also have smaller bots more suitable for family use. But overall, service robots are not yet fully commercialized and mass-produced. Here, Yo-Yo is taught to act as a guide through a museum.
First came the internet, then came handheld and portable electronic devices. What will the bot era bring us? How will AI bionics and robotic developments transform our lives? This is only just the beginning. Grace Zhao, CGTN, Beijing.
So for more on this, we're now joined by Dr. Jay Huang in the Beijing studio, founding partner of Jadestone Capital and former managing director of Intel China. And in Pittsburgh, we also have Dr. Chaohui Gong, project scientist at the Robotics Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. Thank you both for joining us. So the theme of this year's World Robotic Conference is this: win-win collaborative innovation towards the building of intelligent society. Dr. Huang first, how do you interpret this intelligent society? What does it entail?
I think for the intelligent society, for people living there, their life should be very convenient. Lots of work and will be done by robots and also by automation. And also the whole society should be very efficient.
And Dr. Gong, your interpretation of the intelligent society?
I totally agree. I think it's absolutely true as more and more automation and robotic technology is being used in a lot of daily aspects. A lot of tedious jobs can be handled by robots, can be handled by automation solutions, and people will be released from these tedious jobs and start doing more creative work.
Let's talk about this. The bot economy is so hot right now, but Dr. Huang, brief us on the status quo of the robotic industry, because a lot of the robots we see in China are imported from Japan or Germany, but what's the bigger picture look like?
I think when we look at the robots, and then I think the two categories. One is industrial, and there's lots of robots already being used in the industry for automation purpose, like in assembly line, etc. And another one is for the consumer use. Now people pay more and more attention about this robotics technology, and robots get used and for the consumer applications. I think the trend will be we'll see more and more these kind of things, and also artificial intelligence and got used and in this and automation and the robots.
And Dr. Gong, you kind of agree the service robots and industrial robots are the next hot trend?
Yeah, I totally agree. Especially nowadays, you can see a lot of robots are being used in logistics. When you click online, purchase something, actually there are so many robots, hundreds of robots moving around in the warehouses. People might not just have been aware of these robots already being used in these logistics sectors. And of course, as the technology of robotics being more and more mature, a lot of these technologies can be used for service purposes, like being used in shops, restaurants, and museums. And a lot of people can directly benefit from interacting with these robots.
But how do you guys envision the future? I mean, Dr. Huang, do you think the world will be completely automated someday?
I'm not quite sure it will be 100% automated, but automation will be a lot more popular than today. We can expect a lot of work today we have been doing will be replaced by either robots or by automation.
And where does China's robotic technology stand?
I think we can separate them out into two categories. One is the hardware, the other one is the software. I think if on the hardware side, as you correctly pointed out, I think China is still lacking a lot of key components. We still need import from Japan or Germany. However, on the software side, I think China has been doing quite well. And then I think China is not further behind, maybe on par with the world leader in terms of software side. In terms of applications, and I think China will do very well in terms of application using those robots. That's my view.
Dr. Gong, do you agree? What is the biggest competitive edge when it comes to China's robotic technology?
Yeah, so I agree. China really starts the China really starts the manufacturing, starts the industrial revolution later than the Western countries, and a lot of these like hardware manufacturing technologies requires a lot of accumulation, iterations, and the polishment by getting feedbacks from the markets. And China is really trying hard to catch up in terms of these manufacturing technologies in building these hardwares for robots. On the software side, nowadays the AI revolution or the AI technology is booming. And China is indeed participating in the top tier game and have the world-leading researchers, world-leading companies developing the most impressive, most advanced AI systems as well. So we can see as China through a lot of getting feedbacks from the market, through the iterations of building generations and generations of robots, they will have very polished software through acquisition or through their own development. China will start building very good hardwares as well. So I can see a future China will start producing the most advanced robotic systems in the world.
But now, talking about robots, the first thing came to a lot of people's mind is the possibility of it replacing jobs, right? Dr. Huang, are we ready for this? How should we prepare for it?
I don't know if we're ready for that, but this is coming and to our side, and then regardless, I think we're going to see more and more jobs and maybe replaced by AI or robots. And there is an article, and people are speculating or anticipating some says 50% of the jobs will be replaced by AI in next 10 to 20 years. Somebody gave even higher number. But regardless, I think a lot of work and today and people are doing will be replaced by AI and robots. That's for sure.
Dr. Gong, is it something to fear? What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, so I think definitely for sure the purpose of developing robots is to replace some of the labor-intense and tedious jobs so that we can release people and start doing more creative jobs with more fun. And I can see a lot of nowadays jobs will be replaced. And there will be, in order to elevate this situation, this is not a purely technical issue. The government need to start putting regulations, need to start thinking forward, how to get people trained, how do people to get the correct skills to prepare for the robotic automation solutions to come.
So be more specifically, let me give you the numbers. Approximately 100 million people are now employed in manufacturing here in China, and that sector accounts for almost 36% of China's gross domestic product. While in the United States, the number is around 12 million. Dr. Huang, what will happen to this workforce?
I think short-term wise, and the impact will not be very big, but long-term wise, I expect to see quite a big impact to this number of the workforce, as you mentioned. I think we'll already see some of the trend happening in China. Take e-commerce as example, and you found that it's e-commerce bring a lot of convenience for consumer. On the other hand, a polarized workforce. You found the people who have computer skills, and they can find lots of jobs and then better jobs. But on the other hand, and then you found we use a lot of people purely for delivery. That cannot be, say, very good jobs. And so we already see e-commerce bring the workforce in like a into two sides of it, polarize the workforce. I think with the AI coming in, may even further polarize the workforce. I think that's the challenge for all of us.
Dr. Go, what do you make of this?
Yes, so yeah, I can think a good portion of the current manufacturing jobs will be replaced by automation technology, by robots. Just by taking the famous Foxconn factory as an example, they have already started deploy robots in a massive scale and have replaced many jobs. But people should not be too concerned about that as long as we're very well prepared for this. By taking in the first industrial revolution as an example, people were very concerned about the machines will replace the jobs. But if you think these machines are the tools to help people to do more things, to do greater things, actually the robots can be treated the same. The robots can help people to do more stuff, and people should change their mindset, change their vision, change how they work with the robots, how to use the robots, and start doing high-skill, more creative jobs. And I believe with the collaboration between the academia, the industry, the government, we will figure out a good solution to replace these, not only to improve the productivity, also to find a good route so that people will still be very well employed.
Well, it seems like it's an unstoppable trend now, but let me read this to our viewer and to you both and then get your response to this. So fears about the rise of AI and the risk posed by machines have escalated in recent years as technologies used in warfare develop. So Elon Musk and other technology leaders have issued a stark warning about so-called killer robots, urging the United Nations to act to prevent a high-term arms race. Now, Elon Musk said everything that's a danger to the public is regulated, and AI should not be an exception, adding that AI is much more risky than the DPRK, but some say it is already too late to regulate. Dr. Huang, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that there are two schools of thought on this. One is represented by Musk, and they think that AI is very dangerous. There is another school of thought thinking that AI is okay, and also have a famous and leader on that side.
Where do you stand?
Personally, I'm not opinionated yet because I see the AI is unprecedented and development, technology development, and in facing us. We don't know how AI is going to pan out and in the next 10 or 20 years. But personally, I'm optimistic about the future. I think we can find a solution to cope with that. I think the real danger may not be necessarily the robots and then replace the people or killing people. Actually, before that, we already see the danger. For example, today people can, for example, you're wearing a helmet and then with some stimulant on your brain, and then you can make yourself feel really calm and comfortable. So that kind of half machine, half man, and it's already here. It's reality today. That's also quite a risk. And then we, as a human being, may get controlled and actually by this machine, and then we may addict to that. So that actually is a real danger, and then may happen earlier than the killer robots, for example.
Dr. Gong, which camp do you stand on this issue? Is it dangerous, or is it, the friend of human? And is it possible to make autonomous technology system absolutely safe and ethical?
So I think there's always a risk associated with any new technology. First of all, I'm optimistic about robotics technology, AI technology, and we should embrace the coming of these technologies. That's my opinion. And I do not deny the fact that it can be dangerous. Like, for example, if you invent a car, it can hit people on the road, and it is a dangerous situation. And also, I definitely agree with Elon Musk. We should start proposing some strategies, regulations on how we use these technologies, how we make sure these technologies are safe. And these are two different perspectives. Like, for example, the purpose of military robots is for inspection, surveillance, and sometimes even to kill some people. And that's the intention, that's the danger come from the intention of these technology or how to use these technology rather than the technology itself. And second, a lot of researchers start experiencing the problem, like taking the AI or deep neural network as an example. A lot of time people do not or have not yet grabbed the deep understanding of the working principle of these technology. And a lot of times people will see unexpected consequences. The program itself is following exact instructions of human programmed, but the consequence can be very dangerous. So we should start thinking about technologies, regulations to make sure before we deliver these systems into the human society, we should make sure they're safe enough. And we need the regulation to ensure that happens.
We have very little time, but there's another concern I want to address. There's another concern that a robot can be easily hacked, Dr. Huang. If hacked, a home robot can even attack its owners, right? It raises the question about allowing these robots into homes, into offices, into factories. Is there a way to solve this?
I think that the network security, and it's a real challenge for all of us, with or without robots in our home. I think there's a common challenge we all have to cope with. I think we probably cannot say, and because the robots can be hacked, and then so we do not use them at home. I think that's probably too negative. All we need to do is make sure, and then the robot is safe, and also we have some emergency control just in case and what happens on the robots. But I think just because the network security and it's a challenge, we just do not use robots. That's probably not the right way.
All right, many thanks, Dr. Jay Huang, joining us in our Beijing studio, and Dr. Cha-Hui Gong joining us there in Pittsburgh. Thank you all for joining us. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, you can visit our website. Just type World Insight CGTN into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel as well. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me and everyone on the World Insight team, thank you for again next time for insights across China and around the world. Have a good night.